and welcome to the 10th Revolution Group Tech Success Podcast, where we bring you insightful conversations with industry-leading tech professionals. So my name's Catherine Lord, and today I'm joined by Stephen Massey from Anordia. A warm welcome to you. Do you want to introduce yourself properly?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Catherine, for having me on today. I'm Stephen Massey, partner at Anordia. We're a consulting firm focused on AI strategy, innovation, and governance for banking and financial services. I lead the governance practice, where I work with organizations on how they can adopt AI in a way that's responsible, practical, and aligned with risk, compliance, and broader business objectives.
Amazing. Okay, so for the listeners who are listening in today, I think they often hear the term AI governance, but maybe don't actually totally understand what it means in practice. So do you want to explain that in a bit more detail?
Yeah, when people hear the term AI governance, I think they often imagine something quite abstract, maybe a policy document, a set of controls, or a compliance team reviewing things at the end. In practice, it's much more about operational, and it's much more operational than that. AI governance is really the system an organization uses to make sure AI is being used responsibly, safely, and with accountability. So it covers things like who is allowed to approve an AI use case, how risk is assessed, who is responsible for oversight, and how the organization monitors AI once it becomes actually in use. I usually try to explain it in simple terms. AI governance is how you stop AI from becoming everyone's responsibility in theory, but no one's responsibility in reality. So it's about creating clarity. Who owns the decision? Who checks whether the data is appropriate? Who challenges the outputs? And if the AI is being used in a sensitive area, whether that's customers, employers, employees, being used in a sensitive case, whether it's like lending or fraud or operations, who is accountable if something goes wrong? And that to me is where governance becomes real. And I think that matters because AI is no longer sitting off to the side as a pure innovation topic. It's becoming, increasingly part of core business processes and decision making. So governance is not really just there to document principles or satisfy a regulator. It's there to make sure AI can actually be used in a way that people inside the organization can understand, trust, and can stand over. And in that sense, good governance is not separate from adoption. It's actually part of what enables innovation and makes adoption sustainable. So I suppose if I had to put it in one line, I'd say that AI governance is the practical discipline of making sure AI is used responsibly by design, not just explained after the fact. And once you define it in that way, you can already see why it naturally becomes a conversation about people, judgment and accountability and trust, and not just the technology itself.
Yeah, no, totally understand. And I can tell you there's a lot of clients that are trying to get in their data in order, ready for AI adoption. I don't think everybody's there quite yet. So let's see what happens in the next 6 to 12 months. So obviously people think about AI governance, and you mentioned they're talking about regulation, controls, policies. But why do you see it first and foremost as the people issue?
Yeah, because policies and controls, they don't govern anything on their own. People do. And at the end of the day, AI governance comes down to human decisions. Who approves a use case, who challenges it, who understands the limits of a system, and who is ultimately accountable if something goes wrong. That's why I see it first and foremost as a people issue. And that framework matters because it's the behavior around a framework and a system that matters just as much. You can actually see that in the direction the regulation is following as well. Under the EU AI Act, providers and deployers, they have to ensure that there's a sufficient level of AI literacy among staff. And that takes into account their knowledge, their training, their experience, and also the context in which the AI is used. So that's a really important signal because it tells us that governance is not just about putting rules on paper. It's also about whether the people who use the technology are capable to adopt it and to use judgment around it responsibly. And I think in practice, most governance failures are not dramatic sci-fi style failures. They're usually something much more ordinary than that. That happens because people assume someone else has reviewed the risk, or that they don't know when to escalate a problem, or maybe they're not confident enough to challenge a AI use case if the initiative is really important to the organization and the strategy that they're adopting. So when I say AI governance is a people issue, it's what I really mean is responsible AI depends on human judgment and accountability and human culture as well. Policies create structure, but people create the trust. And if you get the people side of things wrong, even the best looking governance framework won't work well in practice.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So you said that good AI governance should enable innovation, sort of not slow it down. So how does that look really in reality, though, and where would it sit?
Yeah. When I say good AI governance should enable innovation, I think what I mean is that it should give people clarity and not create a sense of drag. So teams need to know what the guardrails are, what kind of use cases need deeper review, who has approval or authority, and what good risk taking actually looks like in that case. And if that's not clear from the start, then governance actually it speeds things up because it reduces uncertainty. Without that, people either hesitate because they're nervous, or they move too quickly and create problems after the fact. And in reality, that means that governance has to sit inside the life cycle and not outside of it. It should be there when a use case is being explored, when data is being assessed, like we talked about earlier, and the challenges that people have in getting that data to work correctly. But also when a model is being tested and deployed, and when it's being monitored after as well. And that's very much part of the logic of the NIST AI risk management framework. That's the National Institute for Standards and Technology. Um, they treat governance as an ongoing cross-cutting capability rather than some kind of final sign-off step. So, in a practical terms, good governance sits partially in a central function, often risk, compliance, or perhaps its own AI governance function, which we're seeing more frequently. But it also has to be embedded across other functions like product and technology, data and legal, and the business itself. And that matters even more now because the regulatory environment is getting more concrete. So organizations need governance that it's not just theoretically sound, but also operationally usable. And it also helps teams to move forward confidently while still managing risk in a structured way. So my answer would be that good governance, and good AI governance particularly, sits both at the center and across the organization. It needs a clear home in terms of oversight and accountability, but it also has to live where the AI is actually being designed and used. And if that's done well, it should feel less like bureaucracy and more like an operating model that supports responsible innovation.
Yeah, and become a lot more efficient and effective, we should hope. So, where organisations are under pressure to automate sort of more decisions, so what does success actually look like?
Yeah, and success is a challenging thing to assess because we're still developing use cases. We're still looking at what efficiency looks like and how it adds to a business case. Um, I think human judgment and challenge are central to that. And the more organizations automate, the more important it becomes, I suppose, clear about what human judgment is and where it sits in that process. AI can help speed and scale and add consistency, but it doesn't really remove accountability. So someone still has to decide whether a use case is appropriate, whether the outputs are reliable, whether the context has changed, and what to do when a system produces something unexpected. So for me, automation doesn't reduce the need for judgment. It increases the need for good judgment. And that's very much where the regulation is taking us as well. When you look at the EU AI Act and how deployers of high risk AI, they need to design and assign human oversight to a person within the organization and the wider framework that puts real weight on human oversight. I also think challenging this system is important because as much as judgment is relevant, being able to challenge it after is what helps AI be successful in that long term. And one of the biggest risks an organization has is not that the AI is just obviously broken, but that people stop questioning it. Just because the system seems efficient or it seems to be adding a certain degree of what's expected of success, perhaps it's commercially important. Good governance creates space for people to kind of ask those basic but essential questions like, should we be using it here? What can go wrong? What happens if the model starts drifting? Because once the underlying models that are developing change and get updated, that can affect the way the use case is ultimately implemented. Um, but governance is something that should be ongoing with clear roles, responsibilities, and dialogue around that risk, not a once off exercise for approval. And just going back to the question on success, what does that actually look like? I think like an organization where people know when to trust AI, when to test it, when to challenge it, it looks like clear oversight with clear escalation when it's needed and enough confidence, I suppose, in the culture that people can raise concerns early without feeling like they're blocking innovation. So, in other words, success is not it's not that AI is deployed; it's that it's deployed in a way that people can stand over and explain and have trust in.
Yeah, and I suppose for a lot of industries, it would be just the pure volume of activity that could happen using AI in comparison. Okay. Yeah, no, all makes sense. And I suppose just out of interest, say senior managers regime within the FCA, would you see there being something specific to AI linked to kind of senior managers regime in the future?
In terms of a position, or in
Yeah.
terms, I think the more this gets integrated, the more we're seeing roles like a chief AI officer, and
Hmm.
that officer or that office that kind of manages AI will have people involved in strategy so that they can assess use cases,
Hmm.
so that they can integrate it across the organization. You're looking at change management there. You can take that on a project by project basis as you implement different types of AI because it's not just AI anymore. There's Gen AI and there's all kinds of different use cases that can be implemented depending on what the organization is looking at and doing. I think the more we codify it and clarify it as well by giving responsibilities like this to particular positions, then it creates clear accountability and also impetus to lead that change. Having a function that's dedicated to AI also enables more cross-functional engagement as well, because they'll have a role then within that to seek out the different I suppose, the supporters or the champions in different departments or business units or
Yeah.
functions like legal and compliance. And
Hmm.
it just brings things together, depending on how important AI is to the organization and to the strategy as well. That
Yeah.
level of seniority then can have different positions within the whole governance and leadership structure as well. And then it gives organizations a chance to vary that depending on what's needed for their particular use case.
Yes, and it would definitely elevate the importance, wouldn't it? So interesting. Well, let's watch this space. So, for someone listening who wants to build a career in AI governance, what skills and qualities do they need beyond technical knowledge?
Yeah, I think one of the encouraging things about AI governance is that it's not just a field that's reserved for like a deeply technical person. Technical fluency is absolutely something that helps, but beyond that, what really matters is being able to connect different worlds, and that kind of goes back to what I was saying about the cross-functional nature of it. You need people who can speak to data scientists and lawyers, compliance teams, senior executives, and then also the business leaders, and help them to make sense of AI risk in practical terms that they can understand and that relate to their work. That's why I often describe AI governance as a hybrid career. It's part risk, part strategy, part communication, and also part leadership. And the qualities I would highlight would be judgment, curiosity, because this is still a very rapidly developing technology,
Yes.
communication, and also the confidence to challenge something constructively, to ask those kinds of questions.
Yeah.
A lot of the work is not just in building the model. It's about asking good questions around it and spotting where accountability really sits.
Hmm.
To make sure that governance actually works in the context of your particular organization.
Hmm.
And I also think AI literacy is becoming a much bigger part of the picture. Organizations need to really ensure a sufficient level of AI literacy among its staff. We're seeing that with training programs of all different kinds, and also different levels of seniority, because implementing an AI use case is different from designing it or thinking about how it fits into the organizational strategy as a whole. We have to ask and learn about AI from our particular context,
Yes.
because that really changes how you view AI and um, the way you engage with it. So to me, I think there's a lot of growing value in people who can educate, influence, and also build good capabilities across a business, not just write a policy or review controls. And I think if someone is listening and thinking about a career in the space, my advice would be to learn enough about AI so that you can ask those intelligent questions.
Mhm.
But then also don't underestimate the soft skills involved. I think the field really rewards people who can combine things like being able to challenge with also collaborating with other team members, looking at regulation, but also the real world practicality of how your given AI use case is going to influence and change the business. And in many ways, I think the strongest AI governance professionals are really translators, because they're the people who can help an organization turn principles into decisions and decisions into trusted practices.
Yeah, no, it's an incredibly interesting time. I'm loving embracing it and I love learning new things. So yeah, it's we'll see how it plays out in the next 12 to 24 months. So I really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you very much for enlightening our kind of listeners. And yeah, I look forward to welcoming you back in the future as well.
Yeah, I look forward to it. Thank you, Catherine, for having me on today.